So welcome everybody. Tonight we are talking about on-farm demonstration research, which is also often referred to as producer-led research. I'm going to quickly hand it over to Emma before we get too far along. I'm going to hand it over to Emma Holmes from the Ministry of Ag just to give us a quick overview of the larger concept of this program that I'll be talking about. Well, I'll be talking about case studies, and Emma will talk about the larger program from the province. So, Emma, if you don't mind.
Yeah, hello everybody. Um, so thank you everyone for joining. This webinar is part of the Ministry in Agriculture and Foods Regional Extension Programming. Dr. Catherine Tarasoff is leading a multi-year soil health on-farm demonstration research project in the North Okanagan and Thompson region. And as part of this project, Catherine is working with producers to conduct on-farm demonstration research on a variety of beneficial management practices. So yeah, stay tuned for updates and field days on those projects over, next year, next few years. And we know on-farm demonstration research is a powerful tool for bridging the gap between scientific innovation and practical application in agriculture. So in addition to conducting on-farm demonstration research, we have asked Catherine to also share information about how to conduct on-farm demonstration research. So through this webinar, through an upcoming field day next Thursday, October 9th in Chase, there'll be a kind of an in-person component of this, how to conduct on-farm demonstration research. And then also an agrologist guide to on-farm demonstration research to complement her existing guide on farm demonstration research. And this series is aimed at producers as well as agrologists and students who may be interested in getting involved in on-farm demonstration research.
Thanks, Emma. So I want to acknowledge that I am coming today from the unceded and ancestral territory of the Secwepemc, currently referred to as Kamloops. And yeah, I'm really pleased that you're all joining us tonight, and we will get started. So the goal of this webinar tonight is for me to highlight some case studies of projects that have happened in the past. So, like Emma said, we're just initiating a whole new series of on-farm demonstration research projects, but this isn't the beginning of this process. It actually started about 10 years ago with the BC Forage Council. So I'm going to present some case studies from work that has been done over this past decade. And I hope it will inspire you to consider doing your own producer-led research on your farm, or to reach out to me or Emma and ask us, okay, how can I get involved? What opportunities are there? Mm. So, what is on-farm demonstration research? It's a mouthful, but it really is just specific research that is site and management specific, that addresses a particular question or need that a producer has. It's not meant to be broadly applied across all farm situations. Um, it often is sort of dovetails in with the management practices that are being sort of implemented on the farm. It's not meant to be published. It's not going to undergo any rigorous scientific review. Um, it's really meant to answer some very particular questions, or to address a need that a producer has in order to reach their farming goals. It does, however, need to follow a specific set of experimental design criteria, and this is so that the producer has confidence in their results. Too often, people say, oh, well, it just looked better. And saying it looked better, it will not give you confidence in your results, because your eyes will see what your brain wants to see. So, like Emma said, This work is based on this guide, which I wrote for the BC Forage Council about 10 years ago. So it's very forage heavy. And the presentation tonight is, ironically, I guess, all forage type projects. But we do have projects that are not forage based. There's one for a cherry producer in the Okanagan. And we have upcoming field day, which includes market gardener in Chase. So I want to start with this video because it's real producers talking about their real experience doing on-farm demonstration research.
The climate has changed a lot around Vanderbilt. When my first grandfather came here, people couldn't grow grain to maturity. They couldn't grow grass seed to maturity.
In this area, farmers know that things are changing. For them to be able to conduct their own research in the face of climate change, it allows them to stay competitive in a changing market.
In the central interior, 4 producers completed on-farm forage trials to inform a new farm research manual intended to assist producers across British Columbia to adapt to increasing climate variability. The manual enables site-specific data collection and accounts for farm and microclimate variability. 2 of those producers and the author of the research manual share their experiences with this project.
My name's Catherine Tarasoff, and I've written the Guide to On-Farm Demonstration Research. The research manual is a step-by-step process for any producer, whether you're growing cabbages, corn, pigs, forage. It guides you through the fundamental steps of conducting your own research. The concept of the manual was instigated by the BC Forage Council, and it was really driven by producers in the Vanderhoof area, and they knew that they needed to be able to change with the times.
In the past, we may have just spent a lot of money on some seed, tried it. If there was a failure for whatever reason, we would have just discarded it altogether. And we can lose a lot of time and money. The manual does provide a way to find some results on a little smaller scale to start with, and then you can grow your test from there.
What the manual gives you, the producer, is a template and a format to follow. We've also incorporated 3 case studies throughout the manual so you can see what the producers in Vanderhoof did. We've also incorporated worksheets throughout the manual so that you have something to sit down and work through as you go through each chapter. And most of the manual would actually be conducted at your kitchen table.
Well, it's not as hard as it seems to do your own research. The facts are there in writing. I can look back at that instead of just trying to go by memory. If I make a change, then I can see what is working and what isn't working. Can mean the difference between not making any money and making some money.
So conducting your own research on your own farm is so important because every farm is unique. Every farm has different soils, different actual microclimates.
What might work on the other side of town isn't necessarily going to work here.
Over at Smith Creek Farms, Wayne wanted to identify the optimal seeding rate and mix for more variable rainfall. Using test hoops to count plants and track results, Wayne compared a 5-way seed blend against a single variety alfalfa with low and high seeding rates. The result, the 5-way blend had a higher yield than all other applications.
We had an economic analysis or assessment at the end of the project, and all of the projects reaped financial benefit. So for a farmer, the manual allows them to really fine-tune their own farming practices. It allows them to develop almost like a regional consortium of other farmers so that if each farmer is implementing some research on their farm, they can talk to each other about it now. They can actually communicate with one another with the same level of understanding because they're developing their own research projects based on a research manual.
The manual is a new tool and it can be just as important as your tractor or your field or any equipment you use. It's another tool in your toolbox to get better results and help you stay afloat.
Sometimes climate change brings challenges, and for those producers that grab on to opportunities associated with conducting their own research, not only does it allow them to accept and modify their practices based on climate change, it may also provide them with new opportunities that they would have never known existed.
This project is part of the work being delivered by
Okay, so I am going to talk about Wayne's project, and I'm going to talk about two other projects tonight. And I'm going to start with this project with Jamie. He is a multi-generational farmer in Rock Creek area, and they've been farming that land for almost 100 years. And he's a dryland forage producer, so he has to rely heavily on snowmelt. His soil is very compact, and he's noticing, or he has been noticing over the years, that less and less soil moisture, less and less water is getting into the soil profile. So while we use tillage a lot, it comes with a lot of negative parts or aspects to soil health. And one of the big ones is soil compaction. So in an ideal soil condition on the left, you would have great soil structure, lots of aggregates. Those aggregates, they hold together really well, and it allows for 50% of the pore space to be occupied with water and air, and that promotes really, really good plant growth. When the soil gets compacted, those aggregates broken up into smaller and smaller little pieces, and they get compressed so close to each other that it's hard for water and air to get into the soil. And then, of course, it impacts plant growth, and you get much reduced plant growth. So for Jamie and for all the projects, it's really important that they don't try to reinvent the wheel. It's that they work on something that they build on something that they already know works. And so for all these producers that I'm going to talk to you about tonight, they've all built off of something where they already kind of know it works. They just don't know how well it works. So Jamie had already tried forage radishes. They're also called tillage radishes, and they're well known for breaking up the hardpan layer. The root of the radish is daikon style, so it's long like a carrot, a long taproot. So he knew that it would grow, but he really didn't know the impact that it would have on water infiltration. So he needs to get the snow melt, the water in the ground. That's called infiltration. He didn't know, would they change the yield? Maybe they would outcompete his regular forage crop. And then he also didn't know, how do radishes affect the nutritional quality of his forage? So to answer those questions, first we have to understand what's his goal. He wants to improve crop yields. He's seeing declining crop yields in this one particular field. And he's pretty sure that to do that, he needs to increase water infiltration. He sees water running off during snowmelt. And then there's his questions. Will forage radishes increase water infiltration? what's the difference in yield between his standard annual forage mix and one where he's added forage radishes? And do the radishes affect the nutritional quality of his forage? So in order to answer those questions, we had to set up a research trial, and he had a 60-acre field that he was going to seed that spring. It doesn't have to be big. One of the things I always make sure that I have a conversation with the producer about is how much land can you actually risk? What if you have a crop failure? He was very confident. He's had the radishes growing before, so he said, "Oh, it's fine. We'll just chop the 60-acre field in half." So half the field was seeded with 110 pounds per acre of triticale oats and peas, which is his standard silage forage. And the other half, he did that, but he added 6 pounds per acre of these daikon styled radishes or tillage radishes or forage radish. Now, after that was done, we just left it. We didn't fertilize one half and not fertilize the other half. Everything was exactly the same. Just before he was going to do his main harvest, we went out with hula hoops and we threw, just like what you saw Wayne do in the video, we threw 10 hula hoops on one side of the field, 10 hula hoops on the other side of the field. And that was to get a good estimate of forage yield. Next, he wanted to know about infiltration. So then we did 10 infiltration measurements on one side and 10 on the other side. When it comes to forage quality, we did grab samples from his silage and we sent that off for analysis. Okay, so if you're not familiar with the coffee can method, there's a little link down there. You can just Google it, coffee can method. It's a really user-friendly, excellent way to look at water infiltration and to get some baseline information for yourself about how fast or slow is water getting into the soil. So for Wayne, not Wayne, Jamie, the water infiltration, this graph, I'm going to walk you through this graph. So here, this is the y-axis, and it just says infiltration centimeters per hour. So that's just telling you how fast is the water getting into the soil. The higher the number, the faster the water is going into the soil. Across the bottom, the x-axis, we have control. That's just his standard forage mix, oats, peas, triticale. And then we have radish, which is oats, peas, triticale with the 6 pounds per acre of radish. So when we look at his results and the rate of water infiltration, we see that already you can see that the control is lower than the radish. So the water is moving into the soil more slowly in the control area, half of the field, than it is in the radish area of the field. The next thing that I think is interesting to look at is these little hats that are coming off the top of the main bar. Those little hats show you how much variability is in his data. So the control has very little variability. It means the field is uniformly compact. We have the water going in slowly, and it's pretty consistent across that half of the field. When we look at the radishes, on average, yes, the water is going in faster, but then we have this lots of variability, like huge amount of variability. To me, that indicates that the radishes are punching holes in the hardpan layer, much like a slice of Swiss cheese. So everywhere where the radishes have been able to break up that hardpan layer and punch through it, you get really rapid water infiltration. So faster infiltration rate means more capacity to move water into the soil and hopefully down deeper into the soil where it can be available for plants sort of later, further into the growing season. He also wanted to know about yields. So that's what we threw the hoops for. And we can really see that the yields are not that different. So they're both getting about 3.5 tons per acre. The big difference again is in the variability. So in the control, oats, peas, triticale, lots of variability. So it was quite patchy. There were some spots where he was getting really good yield, and then there were some spots where he was getting really quite poor yield. And then same thing over here with the radishes, very low variability, which means the yields were consistent where he had planted the radish. We then divided that yield and looked at the proportion of weeds. And we see that in the control, almost a ton per acre of his yield is weeds. And in the radish, he had much less weeds, at least half the weeds. So the radishes are the yields are more uniform and there's less weeds. It was just a more uniform field in general. He wanted to know about forage quality if he's going to use these radishes. And so the relative feed value, which is just a sort of a measurement of the quality of the feed when it takes a whole bunch of things into account. With the radishes, it was 111, and without the radishes, it was 78. And in fact, the feed quality report without the radishes, it had some red flags in terms of nutritional quality. And with the radishes, those red flags were gone. So it met, the baseline feed requirements for his cows. Okay, so conclusions for Jamie. The radishes are really starting to break up that hard pan layer. He does need to, or I, recommended that he keep using the radishes because there's really no reason not to. And it will just continue to improve over time as it breaks up that hard pan layer and you get more and more and more Swiss cheese type holes in the hard pan. The yields were not compromised, and in fact, he had less weeds, and the forage quality was improved. So this is a screenshot of his case study, and at the end of the presentation, I'll give you the link, and you can go look at all the case studies that have been done by me over the past few years. Okay, the next project. There's quite a bit of like kind of backstory that you need to know in order to understand what's going on. And this figure, I'm going to present it a couple times. So how little is too little? This is Wayne Ray's project, which you saw in the video. Wayne he's not a big, large scale producer, and he's outside of Vanderhoof. He also dry land farming, so no irrigation. Um, so he wants to know how low of a seeding rate can I use? And I also don't want to be reseeding a field every 3 years. So I need to know what's that kind of break where I can cut back on my seeding, but hopefully not, run the risk of a really bad established field that I have to deal with for 6, 8, 10, 15 years. Now, the other thing that's going on in Vanderhoof, which, some of you are probably aware of, is climate change is really significant to forage producers in Vanderhoof. Unpredictable precipitation and a wacky timing in precipitation too. So I'm going to walk through this image with you. So we're going to start at the red dot. The winters in Vanderhoof, the snow is arriving later and later, and they're getting less snow. So they have a reduced snowpack, and that snowpack is on top of frozen soil. So typically they would have got their snow before really, really cold temperatures. And so the snow would insulate the soil and the soil would not freeze. That's changed, and the snow arrives late, and the ground is frozen by the time the soil arrives. So that's here. They're getting more winter kill or winter injury on their alfalfa because the alfalfa is not protected and the ground is frozen. Then in the spring, when the snow melts, it just runs off the surface because the ground is frozen. So the water is not getting into the soil, and that delays spring growth. Then, when they normally in July, they would have normally done their basically a first cut or their first harvest in July. Well, then rain arrives in July and the fields are too wet to get out there and harvest. So now they're getting pushed into August to harvest their alfalfa. That means reduced protein, that means lower forage quality value of their alfalfa. They cut in August, then the plants are trying to regrow during moisture stress. So in August, they're trying to regrow. It's too dry, the plants are stressed out, and they are prone to injury. And around and around and around you go. So the fields are not lasting as long as they used to. The yields are not as high as they used to be. And often, when they maybe would have gotten two cuts on a field, they're only getting one. So introducing Wayne. Wayne, dryland forage producer. He'd already tried seeding a multi-variety mix of alfalfa. So that's where it's all alfalfa, but there might be 5 varieties all mixed together. But he said, I think it looked pretty good, but I don't really know. It just looks good to me. So what he didn't know was, could he seed at a lower rate? People had told him you're wasting money because he seeds at a high rate because he wants a really good field. So people had told him you're wasting money. You could be seeding at a lower rate. He didn't know if that was true or not. How does the multi-variety mix change yields? Is it, kind of worth the hassle or what's happening? He thinks it increases yields, but he's not sure. Then, would this multi-variety mix be more resilient to climate change? So, they're dealing with drought, they're dealing with late season rain, heavy rain events. Um, so if you plant a multi-variety mix, some of those plants are more drought tolerant. Well, some of those varieties are more drought tolerant. Some of them, they have a heavier dormancy kind of signal. Some of them grow deeper tap roots. Some of them grow more spreading roots. Some of them are more disease resistant. So they're all bred for different traits. And so he's hoping that by having all these different varieties, he's kind of hedging his bets that, oh, if it's really cold and I lose the cold intolerant variety, that's okay because the rest of them will fill that space. So he wants to be more efficient with what he has. He's like a one-man band. He's running the whole show by himself. He doesn't want to put more land into production. He just wants to be more profitable off of what he's currently doing. So he needs to know the best seeding rate because seed costs money. And he also wants to know how that impacts yield and also weeds because, you get your best value. You can charge the most money for forage when it's not got weeds in it. So he wanted to know if he could seed at a lower rate. How would the mix affect his yields? And would it be more resilient to climate change? All these weird climate uncertainty that they're experiencing, and we all are, all producers and everybody is experiencing it. So to do that, we took a 50-acre field, and again, it didn't have to be this big, but he was seeding a 50-acre field, and he's a good alfalfa farmer, so he said, I think I can handle it. Let's do it. And we divided it into 4 equal strips. So that little figure shows you what it looked like. So we had 2 strips that were seeded with a blend of 5 varieties of alfalfa. 1 strip at 12 pounds per acre, one strip at 25 pounds per acre. So 25 pounds per acre is his standard seeding rate. And that's what people said, oh, you're throwing your money away. Then he did two strips seeded with a variety known as Vision. So single variety alfalfa, again seeded at 12 pounds per acre versus 25 pounds per acre. That's all. We didn't do anything else, just divided the field into four parts and seeded it. Oh, actually, no, we avoided the edges because he had some trees and stuff. But we took a section of the field that was uniform, divided it into four parts, and did the four different treatments: low seeding rate, high seeding rate, single variety, and the five-way blend. So this is just a hoop, a picture of Wayne's hoop that he threw out. Sometimes people ask me, well, can't I just count how many bales I get? But that's really not accurate. And part of that is because bale weight is very inaccurate. Bales don't let you avoid things like pivot ruts. They don't let you avoid things like where your tractor got stuck last year or that massive, rock pile of 5 generations of rock picking. They also, if you're in a row cropping or an orchard type situation, it doesn't let you avoid things like where a sprinkler was clogged for 2 weeks or where a sprinkler head blew off and got overwatered for 2 weeks. So this finer scale measurement really allows you to get close to the land and really see what's going on. And so Wayne says, oh, well, yeah, when I looked at my field, they all kind of looked the same. But when I threw my hoops, I saw there were huge differences. And here's his results. It's very telling that if we look right at those two middle rows, so the single variety of Vision seeded high, 25 pounds per acre, he got the same yield as seeding the five-way mix at the low rate, 12 pounds per acre. And he got higher yields when he went all the way to the five-way blend. At the high seeding rate, he got about a ton per acre more in his yield. And then what I think is also really interesting is he dove deeper into it and he separated out his grass and weeds in every hoop. And we can see that the Vision Low and the Vision High still had about 40% weeds. Whereas when we get into these blends, the proportion of weeds really starts to drop off. And you really see it in the last set here. The five-way blend seeded at a high rate, his weeds, and that included grass, down to less than 5% of his yield. And the reason for this is because when you seed all these different varieties of alfalfa, you're introducing diversity. And diversity is what competes with weeds. If whatever plant you're growing, if you grow a monoculture and they're all exactly the same, the weed community will adjust and that single type of alfalfa will only be able to compete with a couple of types of weeds. Whereas when you have 5 types of alfalfa, they're competing with all different sorts of weeds, and they're not competing directly with each other anymore either. Vision alfalfa grows the way Vision alfalfa grows. I don't know how it is, but it's all the same. So they're all competing in the same way for the limited resources that are in the soil. When you have 5 varieties of alfalfa and they're all growing a little different than each other, then they're accessing different pools of resources. Yes, a lot of it overlaps, but some of it doesn't. So they're accessing little pools that nothing else is trying to get, no other alfalfa is trying to get. So the conclusions for Wayne, and this is based, of course, on like 10-year-old economics, the five-way blend seeded at the high rate would net him about an extra $150 per acre per year. He had reduced weeds and higher yields. Now, unfortunately for Wayne, the elk moved in and damaged his field. So we couldn't look at the long-term sort of resiliency of that field. But interestingly, the year after he seeded that multi-variety field, there was a massive winter kill of alfalfa in Vanderhoof. And he told me that those fields fared better than the strips. So those strips fared better than the strips that had the vision. He didn't measure it. He just said, "Oh yeah, the vision got really hit by that really bad winter we had." But the other strips didn't look like they did. So he didn't get the full suite of data that he was hoping for because of the elk damage, but he got enough that he is really confident in using the five-way blend. And the other thing about a five-way blend, it doesn't cost you anything to have a seed company mix a five-way or a 4 or a 10 or a 20-way blend. You just have to buy whatever their minimum seed purchases are. So Wayne says, do it right. Take your soil samples, track your results, keep monitoring. The results are worth the effort. For Wayne, he really did keep track of everything. And he told me his whole project took him 8 hours, everything from start to finish. So that's a good investment in his time. Okay, the last project that I want to talk about, some of these projects, I couldn't have even conceived of them. They're so, in my mind, kind of bizarre, but so unique to the reality of the producer. So this is another forage producer in Vanderhoof called Top Hay. They are a big forage company, I guess, and they really want to access a new market. And the new market is the Saudi Arabian feed market. And so if you grow forage, you've probably seen this diagram here that shows how over time, as the plant is developing, this is called phenology, as it goes through its different stages of plant growth. The yield is increasing as the plant is growing, but the quality decreases. Um, and it can decrease quite quickly here once you get past the early stages of flowering. So it's always this trade-off of like, I need the yield, but I don't want to compromise quality because if the quality is too low, I got to feed the cows like 3 times the amount of food. And that's just a waste of time and money. So there's always this balance. And typically it's like early bud, first flower stage when you want to think about harvesting. Okay, so Top Hay in Vanderhoof, they really want to get into this feed market where they can make a lot more money on their hay. They have built a hay compression plant in Vanderhoof where they can take a large bale, like, I don't know, 700-pound bale, and it goes through a machine that compresses it down into a block. And then it gets loaded onto the shipping container and stuck on a ship, and off it goes across many oceans and ends up in Saudi Arabia. Once it arrives in Saudi Arabia, they will sample it. And if it doesn't reach their cutoff, their minimum forage quality, they'll refuse the whole shipping container and send it back. So that's a huge, huge waste of money for Top Hay if that happens. So this project, they said, okay, we want to get into this market, but we have to know that the forage quality is going to meet their requirements. So here we go with the weather is changing in Vanderhoof image. Every variety, this is Troggett, who was their farm manager at the time. Each variety has an ideal time for harvest. The problem is you often can't harvest because the weather isn't right. So last time we started up here, snowpack, winter kill, water's running off the soil surface. But for top hay, the problem becomes in July, the unseasonable precipitation means they can't get their equipment on the field, which means their harvest is getting pushed to August, which means it's too late for good protein. So he's saying, I know the protein is, every variety has its own protein values, and that seed reps will always tell you the protein at peak protein time, but I often can't harvest at peak protein time because it's pouring rain in July in Vanderhoof now. So, to address this question for him, he really wants to get into the high quality feed market. He needs to know the best timing for different varieties for harvesting so he can answer his question of which varieties hold their forage quality the best. If a variety can hold its forage quality through those different stages of development, then it can give him a wider window of opportunity for harvesting. So it sounds kind of complicated, but actually it wasn't that complicated once we thought about, okay, how are we going to sample this to get the answer that you need? So he wanted to test 6 varieties of alfalfa. They were all varieties that were kind of popular at that time. So he had irrigation, so we weren't dealing with some of the same issues that Jamie and Wayne were dealing with. We did the exact same seeding rate. They seeded everything on the exact same date. It's just 6 different varieties of alfalfa, each in their own strips. Every 2 weeks, he had a field assistant. She went out and she took samples from each variety. Now, the varieties are all developing at different rates. So some are quickly moving along through the stages of development, others are slowly moving along. So when she collected her samples, she sorted them by variety as to whether they were vegetative, late bud, or early flower stages of development. And then those samples were sent off for forage analysis. So this is what it looked like out in the field. We intentionally avoided this pivot rut here. So we thought about things that could affect our results, and we intentionally avoided them. We put 3 varieties in between one set of ruts and 3 varieties in between the next set of ruts. It was Top Hand, Leader, Dalton, Stealth, WL319, and Hybrid. Those may or may not mean anything to you. And here's the results. So don't fall off your chairs if you're a forage producer about these crude protein values. These are fresh samples, uncut, unhandled. So they're higher than what they'll be, once they're cut and baled and blah, blah. So we can see right off the bat that Stealth is the winner. Through all the stages of development, the protein stayed pretty much consistent. Ones like WL319, yeah, it looks great, but then it's really not great. Same with Top Hand, same with Leader. Ones like Hybrid were never particularly good, period. So, like Leader, WL319, and Top Hand, they were popular varieties because they had great crude protein if you could harvest them at that critical time, which Trogget is saying we can't, or we don't know if we can. And we have thousands of acres. And so we need to know when we put in a new field, what are we going to seed it to? Because that field will be in production for 6 to 10 years, and we want to make the right choice. So now he knows. Stealth is the one. If you're going to seed under irrigation, seed Stealth. So that allows him to be flexible with his harvest windows and still have confidence that he is shipping a quality product because Stealth held its protein levels the best over those growing stages. Okay, so those were my 3 case studies. I want to let you know about an upcoming event that's happening, and this is directly a new project with Emma's program, and it's at Galloping Goose Regenerative Farm out near Chase. It's happening next Thursday from 9 till noon, and we are going to look at their mulching trial. And it's a very small, like that's it right there. That one row that's uncovered. It's about 80 feet long, and that's it. It doesn't have to be tens of acres. Um, and they did 1 inch, 4 inches, 1 inch versus 4 inches versus no mulch. And we've been measuring soil moisture. And then before the field day, I will go out and we will harvest and measure the cabbage. And then this exact same row will be put into probably carrots next year, and we'll continue mulching it so we can see the cumulative effect of mulching on soil health and in particular water holding capacity of the soil. So that's also on Eventbrite. The other thing I want to let you know about are, so on my webpage, we have additional case studies that I didn't get to present today, and research templates so that you can, if you wanted to try something, you can just follow the template and you just plug your numbers in. This one over here on the left is an interesting one where he looked at kale as a forage, in a forage mix. And that's an example where we just used maybe a quarter of an acre because nobody had grown kale for forage in Vanderhoof. And he was in the video. His name's Butch, and he said, "Well, I'm not gonna risk a 120-acre field. You know, what if it totally flops?" So it was just a quarter of an acre tucked into just a corner of a field. Okay, so that's the end of the official presentation. I'm going to open it up. If anybody has any questions that they would like to ask, feel free to unmute yourself. We have about 10 minutes. Okay, I'm not hearing any questions or comments. So I think I'm gonna stop recording and you're free to leave if you would like. And if you want to, feel free to reach out via email. If you want to email me any questions, I know sometimes it's hard to ask questions in front of a large group. So I'm gonna